Imagine being married for 22 years, working your hands to the bone as a plumber, and coming home to find divorce papers sitting on your kitchen counter the day before your anniversary. Your wife doesn't cry, doesn't apologize, doesn't even look sad. She just stands there in her expensive blazer and says, "I filed yesterday. Just sign and we can both move on." Most men would have fought back, hired a lawyer, made it ugly. But Francis Wolff? He grabbed a pen and signed every single page without saying a word. His wife looked shocked that he didn't beg. His kids thought he was weak for giving up so easily. His friends couldn't understand why he just walked away with nothing but 3 duffel bags and moved into a tiny apartment above a laundromat. But Francis knew something they didn't. 3 months later, his uncle Leonard, the eccentric hermit his wife had called irrelevant and creepy for years, passed away and left him $8 million.
My name is Francis Wolff. I'm 59 years old and I've spent the last 35 years with a wrench in my hand and grease permanently stained under my fingernails. Built my plumbing business from absolutely nothing, one leaky faucet at a time, one burst pipe at a time. 22 years married to Camila, raised 2 kids together, Dane, who's 28 now, and Rachel, who just turned 25. For over 2 decades, I thought I was doing everything right, checking all the boxes that made a good husband and father. Paid every bill on time, never late once. Showed up when I said I would, no excuses. Never raised my voice at home unless some rookie plumber was about to electrocute himself with a wet drill on a job site. I worked hard, came home tired, and tried to be present for my family, even when exhaustion was pulling me under. Guess that wasn't enough for her. Not nearly enough. The envelope showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, not hand-delivered with some dramatic speech or confrontation, just sitting there on the kitchen counter, right next to the coffee maker when I got home from a job out in Riverside. Thick manila paper. The expensive kind that lawyers use when they want you to know you're completely screwed before you even crack the seal and look inside. Camila was standing by the window with her arms crossed tight over her chest, wearing that navy blazer she'd bought last spring, the one that cost more than my monthly truck payment, the one she wore when she wanted to look important and professional. "You should read that," Camila said, not even bothering to look at me. Her voice was flat, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing this moment in front of a mirror for weeks. I picked up the envelope, felt the weight of it in my hands. Too many pages for anything good, way too heavy for good news. "What is this?" I asked, already knowing deep in my gut what it was. "Divorce papers," she said, finally turning to face me head on. "I filed yesterday. Day before our anniversary, actually. Seemed cleaner that way, more efficient." My hands went completely still. The envelope suddenly felt like it weighed 50 pounds, like I was holding a brick instead of paper. "Cleaner," I repeated, letting that word hang in the air between us. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Francis," Camila continued, smoothing down her blazer with practiced movements. "I've kept everything straightforward and fair. No fighting, no drama. Just sign the papers and we can both move forward with our lives." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in what felt like years. This was the woman I'd met at a community fundraiser way back in 1993, the one who'd laughed at my terrible jokes and didn't seem to mind that I smelled like pipe dope and copper at the end of every workday. She wasn't that woman anymore, not even close. This person standing in front of me now was polished, distant, cold, like she'd been rehearsing this moment for months, maybe years, like she'd already moved on emotionally long before she ever filed these papers. "You've been planning this," I said. Not a question, a statement of fact. "We've been drifting apart for years. You know it, I know it. This is just making it official, putting it down on paper so we can both stop pretending everything's fine when it's not." I opened the envelope and pulled out the documents, scanned the first page with eyes that couldn't quite focus.
Petition for dissolution of marriage. The words were right there at the top in bold legal font. My eyes caught on the date at the bottom of the page, filed one day before our 22nd anniversary, the exact day before. The reservation I'd made at Romano's was still sitting in my phone calendar. The bracelet I'd bought her 3 weeks ago was wrapped in tissue paper and hidden in my toolbox out in the garage, waiting for tomorrow night when I planned to surprise her over dinner. "I'm not fighting this," I said quietly, setting the papers down on the granite counter with a soft thud. Camilla blinked, clearly surprised. Her carefully rehearsed script hadn't included me agreeing so quickly. "You're not?" "No." I grabbed a pen from the kitchen drawer, the one we kept for signing delivery receipts and school forms, started flipping through the pages methodically, reading just enough to understand what I was signing away. Every page got my signature. Every clause that politely translated to "you're not worth fighting for" got initialed in blue ink. My hand didn't shake, not once, and somehow that seemed to bother her more than anything else I could have done. "That's it?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "You're just gonna sign? No questions, no arguments, no discussion?" I looked up at her, pen still in my hand. "What did you expect, Camilla? Begging? Tears? Some big emotional scene where I try to change your mind?" I shook my head. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Her face tightened, jaw clenching, but she didn't respond. Didn't have anything to say to that. I finished signing the last page, slid all the papers back into the manila envelope, and handed the whole thing to her like I was returning a borrowed tool. "I'll be out by this weekend," I said, walking past her toward the stairs without looking back. "You can have the house, the furniture, all of it. I don't want to fight over things that don't matter anymore." Behind me, I heard her exhale, something caught between relief and disappointment, like she'd wanted the fight after all, wanted the drama, wanted proof that I still cared enough to battle for what we'd built together. But I didn't turn around, didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing whatever emotion she thought should be written across my face. I just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, toward the stairs that would take me to the bedroom we'd shared for over 2 decades. By Friday afternoon, I was completely gone. Moved out like I'd promised, no delays, no stalling, no last-minute attempts to change her mind. The apartment I rented was nothing special at all. 3rd floor walk-up on the east side of town, right above a laundromat that hummed and rattled until midnight every single night. Corner store next door sold lottery tickets and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since the Carter administration. The carpet was worn thin in patches from decades of tenants walking the same paths. The refrigerator made sounds like it was in its death throes, and the bathroom faucet dripped constantly no matter how tight I cranked the handle. Ironic as hell considering my line of work. I could have fixed that dripping faucet in about 30 seconds flat, but I left it alone. Let it drip and echo through the tiny apartment. It reminded me I was still breathing, still here, still moving forward, one day at a time. I'd already started packing 2 full weeks before Camilla even handed me those divorce papers. Call it intuition, call it experience, call it just good common sense. But when your wife starts coming home late, smelling like cologne that definitely isn't yours, when she starts dressing different and talking different, you start making contingency plans. You start preparing for the inevitable. 3 duffel bags of clothes, 1 box of essential tools I'd need for work, my father's old recliner that had been in the garage for years, a lamp I'd bought at a garage sale 15 years ago for $3. That was it. That was everything I took with me. Everything else, the house, the furniture, the wedding photos on the walls, the life we'd supposedly built together, I just let her keep it. Not because I was being generous or noble, because I didn't want to fight over things that stopped mattering the second she filed those papers. Dane called me the day after I moved out. My son's voice came through the phone tight and confused, like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't add up. "Dad, what the hell happened?" Dane asked the second I answered. "Mom said you guys are getting divorced. Just like that? Out of nowhere?" "Your mother and I are getting divorced," I said, setting down the wrench I'd been using to tighten up the kitchen sink in my new place. "Small projects to keep my hands busy." "She filed the papers. I signed them. That's all there is to it, son." "That's all there is to it?" Dane repeated, his voice rising with frustration. You were married for over 20 years. You don't just walk away from that like it's nothing, like it doesn't matter. I didn't walk away, Dane, I replied, as calmly as I could manage. Your mother did. I'm just respecting her decision. She made her choice clear. Silence on the other end of the line. Heavy, loaded silence that stretched between us like a canyon. Then Dane spoke again, his voice harder this time, colder. Mom said you gave up, said you didn't even try to fight for the marriage, didn't try to work things out or go to counseling or anything. I closed my eyes, felt that familiar burn of frustration building in my chest, frustration mixed with disappointment that he'd believe her version so quickly. Of course she'd said that. Of course she'd painted herself as the victim. Your mother can say whatever she wants, Dane, I said quietly. I'm not going to argue with her version of events or try to compete for who tells the better story. You're 28 years old now. You're a grown man. You'll figure out the truth on your own eventually. So that's it? My son pressed, anger creeping into his voice. You're just done? Just giving up on everything? Yeah, I'm done. He hung up without saying goodbye.
I stood there in my cramped kitchen after Dane hung up, phone still in one hand, wrench in the other, and wondered how long it would take before he realized I wasn't the villain in this story. How long before he stopped buying Camila's carefully crafted narrative and started asking the hard questions. Rachel called 2 days later. My daughter's voice was completely different from her brother's, softer, more measured, way more thoughtful. She worked downtown at a law firm, saw divorce paperwork cross her desk every single week. She understood the cold mechanics of dissolution, even if she didn't fully understand the why behind this particular one. Dad, are you okay? Rachel asked, genuine concern threading through her words. I'm fine, sweetheart, I told her, and I meant it more than I expected to. Better than fine, actually. Camila's been telling everyone you just quit on the marriage, she said carefully, choosing her words like she was walking through a minefield. That you didn't even want to talk about it or try to work things out, that you just gave up without a fight. What do you think happened? I asked, turning the question back on her. Rachel paused for a long moment. I could practically hear her brain working through the logistics, the timelines, the things that didn't quite add up in Camila's version of events. I think there's way more to this story than Mom's saying. I think there's a whole side we're not hearing. Smart girl, I said, feeling a wave of pride wash over me. You've always been smart, always seen through the surface to what's really underneath. You're right, I continued. There is more to the story, but it's not your burden to carry, Rachel. This is between me and your mother. This is our mess to deal with, not yours. I love you, Dad, Rachel said quietly, and I could hear the emotion catching in her throat. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know. When she hung up, I sat down in my father's old recliner, the one piece of furniture I'd insisted on taking with me, and just stared at the water-stained ceiling. The drip from the bathroom faucet echoed through the silence like a metronome keeping time. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I actually smiled, because I knew something Camila didn't know yet. I knew how to wait. I knew how to be patient. I knew that the truth always comes out eventually, no matter how many lies you stack on top of it. Camila wasted absolutely no time building her new narrative for the world to see. Within a week of me moving out, her social media turned into this carefully curated gallery of liberation and empowerment, like she'd just escaped from prison and was finally living her authentic life. Photos of her at the high-end salon she managed, surrounded by smiling clients holding expensive products and getting their hair done in that trendy style everyone was rocking. Pictures from some wine-tasting event downtown, where she posed with people I'd never seen in my life, all of them dressed to the nines and holding glasses like they were in a commercial. One post really got me. Showed her on somebody's boat out on the lake, champagne glass raised high toward the camera, huge smile plastered across her face. The caption read, "New chapters, new energy, new me." The comments rolled in like applause at a concert. You deserve this, queen. Finally living your truth.
You're absolutely glowing. So proud of you for choosing yourself." I didn't comment, didn't like or react to any of it, just watched from a distance, the way you watch a storm forming on the horizon. You don't run toward a storm when you see it coming. You just make sure your foundation is solid enough to weather whatever's about to hit. And I knew something was coming. I could feel it in my bones. What Camilla didn't post on her perfectly curated social media feed were the cracks starting to form in her shiny, new, picture-perfect life, the things happening behind the scenes that didn't photograph well. Rachel mentioned it during one of our weekly coffee meetups at the diner near my apartment. My daughter sat across from me in the worn booth, stirring 3 sugars into her coffee with this troubled expression on her face. "She's nervous, Dad," Rachel said quietly, glancing around to make sure nobody was listening in. "Mom's nervous, I can tell." "About what?" I asked, cutting into a stack of pancakes that were way better than anything I could make in my shoebox kitchen. "About you," Rachel replied, leaning forward and dropping her voice even lower. "She expected you to fall apart completely, expected you to call her crying, begging her to take you back, doing something desperate, but you didn't. You just disappeared into silence, and now she doesn't know what you're thinking or planning." I took a sip of coffee, black and strong, considering my words carefully. What I'm thinking isn't her business anymore. What I'm planning isn't her concern. That's the whole point of divorce, sweetheart. "Dad," Rachel said, her voice getting even quieter, almost a whisper now. "There's something else you need to know. I saw some paperwork cross my desk at the firm yesterday. Mom's attorney filed a motion to revisit the asset division from the divorce. They're claiming you had hidden business income during the marriage that wasn't disclosed." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth, pancake hanging there, forgotten. "That's a complete lie. There's no hidden income. My books are clean as a whistle." "I know that, Dad," Rachel said quickly, "but they're fishing, Dad. They're looking for something to leverage, some angle they can use to reopen the settlement." I set my fork down carefully, looked at my daughter across the table. 25 years old, sharp as a razor blade, already seeing the legal game for exactly what it was. "Let them fish all they want," I said calmly. "They won't find anything because there's nothing to find. My business is exactly what it looks like, an honest plumbing company that pays its taxes and follows every rule." Rachel bit her lip, then asked the question I could see forming behind her eyes. "What about Uncle Leonard?" I went completely still. Leonard Ashford, my mother's brother, the man who'd built an entire plumbing supply empire from absolutely nothing and spent the last decade living like a hermit in his massive mansion outside Philadelphia. We'd stayed in touch over the years, visits every few months, phone calls on holidays, long conversations about family and business and life. Camilla had always dismissed Leonard as eccentric and completely irrelevant, called him weird, said he gave her the creeps, refused to visit him after the first year of our marriage. "What about him?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, even though my heart was starting to pound.
"His health," Rachel said, her eyes searching my face for something. "I heard from Aunt Margaret last week that he's not doing well at all, and I know you've been visiting him way more than you tell people, way more than Mom ever knew about." I held my daughter's gaze, trying to read what she was really asking underneath the surface question. "Leonard's my uncle," I said simply. "I visit because I care about him, because family matters, not because I expect anything in return." Rachel nodded slowly, but something in her expression told me she understood more than she was letting on, that she'd connected dots I hadn't even realized were there to connect. "Just be careful, Dad," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Mom's watching everything you do right now, every move, every decision, every person you talk to. She's looking for ammunition." "Let her watch," I replied, squeezing back. "She won't see what actually matters until it's way too late to do anything about it." We parted ways outside the diner about 20 minutes later. As I drove back toward my apartment in my beat-up work truck, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Wolf?" A professional voice came through the speaker. Male, older,
carrying that particular tone that lawyers and doctors use when they're about to deliver news. "This is Vincent Harper. I'm the attorney handling the estate of Leonard Ashford. I'm calling to inform you that your uncle passed away yesterday morning." I pulled over to the side of the road immediately, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Leonard, gone. The man who taught me half of what I knew about plumbing, about business, about being a decent human being. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Vincent continued in that same measured, professional tone. "I'd like to schedule a meeting with you as soon as possible to discuss his will. You're named as the sole beneficiary of his estate, Mr. Wolf." The words hung in the air of my truck cab. Sole beneficiary. Leonard had left everything to me. Everything he'd built, everything he'd saved, everything he'd worked his entire life to create. "When can you meet?" I managed to ask, my voice coming out rougher than I expected. "Would tomorrow afternoon work? 2 o'clock at my office in Center City." "I'll be there." Vincent gave me the address and hung up. I sat there on the side of the road for a solid 10 minutes, just breathing, just processing what had happened. Leonard was gone. And somehow he'd seen this coming. Somehow he'd known what Camila was planning before I did. Those visits I'd made, those long conversations about family and loyalty and what really mattered in life, he'd been preparing me without me even realizing it, setting things up, making sure I'd be taken care of when she inevitably pulled the trigger. I put the truck back in gear and drove toward my apartment, my mind already racing ahead to tomorrow's meeting, to whatever Leonard had left behind, to whatever came next in this story that kept getting more complicated by the day. Everything had just changed. The game board had been completely reset, and Camila had no idea what was coming.
3 months. That's exactly how long it took between Camila filing those divorce papers and the phone call that would completely rewrite everything. 90 days of silence, of letting her think she'd outmaneuvered me, of watching her build this new life she thought I couldn't touch. 90 days of working my regular routes, fixing broken pipes and replacing water heaters, keeping my head down and just waiting for the universe to do its thing. Vincent Harper's office was located in Center City, 14th floor of this massive building that smelled like old money and polished mahogany, the kind of place where every surface gleamed and the receptionist looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. The attorney himself was late 50s, perfectly gray hair, expensive suit that probably cost more than my entire month's rent, the kind of man who charged by the minute and made every second worth the price. "Mr. Wolf," Vincent said, standing up from behind his massive desk and extending his hand. Firm handshake, direct eye contact. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please, have a seat." I sat down in the leather chair across from his desk, my work-worn hands folded in my lap. Felt out of place in my clean but faded jeans and button-down shirt, but Vincent didn't seem to notice or care. He opened a thick leather folder and pulled out several documents with that careful precision lawyers have. "Your Uncle Leonard was extremely specific in his instructions," Vincent began, looking at me over reading glasses. "He left his entire estate to you, Mr. Wolf. No conditions, no complicated trusts, no legal hoops to jump through. Everything transfers directly to you upon probate clearance." "How much are we talking about?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt inside. Vincent slid a single sheet of paper across the polished desk toward me. I picked it up, read the numbers twice to make sure I was seeing them correctly. "Total liquid assets, investment portfolios, and the proceeds from the sale of his manufacturing company come to $8 million, Vincent said, watching my reaction carefully. $8 million. The number just sat there on that paper, looking absolutely surreal. I'd been living off maybe $40,000 a year my entire adult life, fixing toilets and replacing water heaters and unclogging drains, working with my hands until they were permanently stained and scarred, and now I was sitting in this fancy office being told I was a millionaire 8 times over. "The timing," I said slowly, my brain trying to catch up with reality, "is important here." Vincent nodded, understanding immediately what I meant. "I'm fully aware of your recent divorce proceedings, Mr. Wolf. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks ago, correct?" "Correct," I confirmed.
Then this inheritance is entirely separate from any marital assets, Vincent explained, his voice taking on that authoritative lawyer tone. Your ex-wife has absolutely no legal claim to it whatsoever. Your uncle made sure the timing was very carefully documented and ironclad. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, waiting for exactly the right moment to make his move. I leaned back in the leather chair, my mind spinning. Leonard had known. Somehow he'd known what Camilla was planning before I did. All those visits over the past year, those long conversations about family and loyalty and what really mattered when everything else fell away. He'd been preparing me without me even realizing it.
There's one more thing, Vincent continued, reaching into his desk drawer. Your uncle left a sealed letter for you. He specifically asked that I give it to you personally, in this office when the time came. He handed me a cream-colored envelope, my name written across the front in Leonard's distinctive shaky handwriting. The handwriting of a man whose hands had worked as hard as mine, but were finally failing him in his last years. I opened the envelope carefully, like it might disintegrate if I wasn't gentle enough, unfolded the single page inside, and started reading Leonard's final words to me. Francis, if you're reading this letter, then everything has happened exactly the way I suspected it would. Your wife never saw your real worth. She saw a simple man with dirty hands and a modest income. She saw someone beneath her, someone she could use and discard when something shinier came along. She didn't see the strength in you, the integrity that money can't buy, the patience that comes from building something real with your own two hands. She didn't see that those qualities make a man truly wealthy, regardless of what's in his bank account. I'm leaving you everything because you're the only person who ever visited me without wanting something in return. You came because you cared, because family mattered to you, because you're decent in a way most people aren't anymore. Use this money wisely, Francis. Protect yourself with it. And when she comes back, and she will come back, I guarantee it, don't let her take anything more from you. You've already given her enough, more than enough. Build something good with this, something that matters, something that'll outlast both of us. Leonard. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and just sat there for a moment. My throat was tight, eyes burning slightly, but I kept it together. Leonard had seen everything clearly, had understood the game being played while I was still pretending it was a real marriage. What do I need to do to protect this? I asked Vincent, my voice rougher than usual, to make absolutely sure she can't touch it. We'll establish a trust immediately, separate accounts, legal barriers, everything documented and time-stamped with precision. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, it'll be completely untouchable, locked down tighter than Fort Knox. I stood up, reached across the desk, and shook his hand again. Let's get started then. Walking out of that office building into the afternoon sunshine, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness exactly, not relief, just this quiet, deliberate sense of control. Like the chessboard had been reset, and suddenly I was holding all the pieces that actually mattered. The text from Camilla came first. Short and casual, like we were old friends just checking in on each other, like she hadn't blown up our entire lives 3 months ago. Hey, heard you were at Romano's last week. Hope you're doing well. I stared at that message for a solid minute, reading between the lines. She was fishing, testing the waters, trying to see if I'd respond, if there was still an opening she could exploit. I deleted it without responding. Didn't even leave her on read, just made it disappear like it never existed.
2 days later, she called. I watched my phone light up with her name, let it ring all the way through the voicemail. Her voice came through the speaker when I played the message back, lighter and more playful than I'd heard in years, almost like the old Camilla from 20 years ago. Francis, it's me. Just wanted to check in on you, see how you're doing. We should probably talk. There are some things we need to discuss about the kids, about loose ends we didn't tie up. Call me back when you get a chance, okay? The kids were 28 and 25, both adults living their own lives. There was nothing we needed to discuss about them. This was pure reconnaissance. She was trying to find an opening, any crack in my armor she could slip through. I didn't call back.
just deleted the voicemail and went about my day. Then came the ambush that she'd clearly been planning all along. I was at First National Bank for a meeting with a private wealth manager that Vincent had recommended, someone who specialized in helping people like me, people who'd suddenly come into money and needed help managing it properly without screwing it up. We were in a glass-walled conference room on the third floor going over trust documents and investment strategies when I caught a reflection in the glass. Navy blazer, that practiced perfect posture, and beside her, a man in an expensive gray suit carrying one of those fancy leather portfolios lawyers love. I turned slowly, deliberately. Camila stood in the bank lobby with Derek Hopkins, her attorney, both of them wearing expressions that were trying way too hard to look casual, but landed somewhere between predatory and absolutely desperate. "Francis," Camila said, walking toward me with that signature smile plastered across her face, the same smile she used to use when she wanted something from me. "What a coincidence running into you here. I didn't know you banked at First National." "I don't," I replied evenly, keeping my voice flat and emotionless. "What do you want, Camila?" Derek Hopkins stepped forward smoothly, extending his hand toward me in that practiced lawyer way. I didn't shake it, just looked at his hand hanging there in the air until he withdrew it, completely undeterred by the rejection. "Mr. Wolf," Derek said in this oily, practiced voice, "I'm Derek Hopkins. I represent your ex-wife. We were hoping we could have just a brief conversation about possibly revisiting some of the terms in your divorce settlement. Nothing major, just a few adjustments." "The divorce is final," I said, my voice calm but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut. "There's nothing to revisit, nothing to adjust. It's done." "Well," Derek continued with that smooth lawyer tone that probably worked on most people, "given certain recent changes in your financial circumstances, we believe an amendment would be appropriate, fair even, equitable for both parties." So they knew. Somehow they'd found out about the inheritance, probably through probate filings or maybe through mutual connections who couldn't keep their mouths shut. The question now was how much they actually knew versus how much they were just guessing and fishing for. Camila's smile widened slightly, showing teeth. "Francis, come on, be reasonable. We were married for 22 years. Don't you think it's only right that we share in any unexpected good fortune, especially when it involves family money that came through during our marriage?" I reached into my jacket pocket, slowly, deliberately, letting the moment stretch out, pulled out a crisp white business card with raised lettering and held it out toward Derek Hopkins. Vincent Harper's contact information, embossed in elegant script that screamed expensive attorney. "Any questions you have about my finances, my inheritance, or anything else can go directly through my attorney," I said calmly, keeping my voice level and professional. "His name's Vincent Harper. I'm sure you've heard of him." Derek took the card, and I watched his expression change. His practiced smile tightened just slightly around the edges. Oh yeah, he knew that name. Vincent Harper wasn't just any attorney. He was the kind who showed up when you meant serious business, when you had real money to protect and weren't playing games. "Francis," Camila said, and I noticed her voice had lost some of that fake warmth already. The mask was slipping faster than she probably wanted. "You really want to do this? Make this adversarial and ugly? Turn this into some kind of legal battle?" I looked at her fully for the first time since they'd ambushed me in the lobby. Really looked at her, not through the lens of 22 years of marriage, but as exactly what she was now, a stranger trying to take something that didn't belong to her. "You made it adversarial when you filed those divorce papers 3 months ago," I said quietly, "when you smiled at me like you just won the lottery, when you walked away with everything we'd built and didn't look back even once. I'm just protecting what's mine now, what Leonard wanted me to have." Her face tightened, jaw clenching. Derek placed a hand on her arm, the universal lawyer signal for, "Shut up and let me handle this." Time to retreat before we make this worse. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Wolf," Derek said smoothly, already turning to guide Camila toward the exit. "Through your attorney, of course." "You do that," I replied. They left. I watched them walk across the marble lobby, Camila's heels clicking with each step, Derek's hand still on her arm like he was afraid she might turn around and say something stupid that would blow their whole strategy. I returned to the conference room where the wealth manager was waiting patiently, and we continued setting up accounts that Camila would never, ever touch. Trusts and barriers and legal walls so thick you'd need dynamite to break through them. The formal motion to reopen the divorce settlement arrived exactly 2 weeks later. Thick manila envelope delivered by courier, signature required. I signed for it and took it straight to Vincent's office. Derek Hopkins had clearly spent some time on this. The motion was creative, I'd give him that. Arguments about undisclosed assets, claims of emotional duress, suggestions that I'd deliberately hidden my relationship with Leonard and the possibility of inheritance. It was well-written fiction, professionally packaged lies, but completely baseless when you actually looked at the facts. Vincent and I met in his conference room to review every single page. He spread the documents across his polished table like he was dissecting a poorly constructed argument, which is exactly what he was doing. "They're reaching hard," Vincent said, tapping one paragraph with his expensive pen. "This entire case relies on proving you knew about the inheritance during the marriage, that you deliberately hid it from her." "Can they prove that?" I asked. "No," Vincent said flatly, "because you didn't know. Leonard never told you his plans. You visited him out of genuine care, not expectation of financial gain."
"But you visited him regularly," Vincent noted, playing devil's advocate like good lawyers do. "They'll try to use that against you, make it look calculated." "I visited because he was family," I replied firmly, "because Camila refused to come after the first year of our marriage, said he gave her the creeps, that his house was depressing. I went alone because someone needed to check on him, make sure he was okay." Vincent made detailed notes on his legal pad. "We'll document all of that. Every visit, every phone call, every interaction. I want to build a timeline that shows genuine relationship, not financial manipulation." Over the next week, Vincent assembled what he called demolition-level evidence. Bank records showing Leonard's estate planning had begun a full 18 months before the divorce was even filed. Notarized letters documenting my visits going back years. Email exchanges between me and Leonard proving I had no clue about his financial plans or intentions. But the strongest piece, the absolute knockout punch, was a video Leonard had recorded 6 months before his death. Vincent played it for me in his office, and I had to fight to keep my composure. Leonard sat in his library, looking frail but with eyes that were still sharp and clear. His voice came through thin but absolutely steady on the recording. "I'm leaving everything to Francis because he's the only person who visited me without expecting anything in return," Leonard said directly to the camera. "My niece-in-law Camila made her contempt for me crystal clear over the years, called me outdated, irrelevant, weird, said my house gave her the creeps and she couldn't stand being around me." He paused, took a breath, then continued. "Francis never did that, not once. He came and sat with me. He listened to my stories. He fixed things around the house without me even asking. That's the kind of man who deserves what I've built, not someone who shows up with their hand out after I'm dead." The video ended. Silence filled Vincent's office like something solid and heavy. "They can't fight this," I said quietly, my voice rougher than I intended. "No," Vincent agreed. "They absolutely cannot." The counter-motion was filed 3 days later. It was thorough, professional, and completely devastating to Camila's case. Vincent had included everything: the timeline, the documented visits, the emails, and most importantly, Leonard's video testimony explaining exactly why he'd chosen me and excluded her. Derek Hopkins called Vincent within 2 hours of receiving the counter-motion. Their conversation was brief and, according to Vincent, pretty much one-sided.
Derek withdrew the motion to reopen the settlement that same afternoon. No hearing scheduled, no arguments presented, no second chances offered. Camila had lost before she'd even really started fighting. That night, I sat in my small apartment and opened a beer. Not to celebrate exactly, just to acknowledge what had happened. The battle I never wanted was over before it really began, and Leonard's final gift to me was protected. My phone buzzed. Text from Rachel. "Dad, I heard Mom's lawyer dropped the case. You okay?" I typed back, "I'm good, sweetheart. Everything's handled. Uncle Leonard made sure of that." Her response came quick. He was a smart man. He knew exactly what he was doing. "Yes, he did," I replied. "Yes, he did." I finished my beer in silence, looking out at the city lights below.
Rachel called me on a Sunday morning about 2 weeks after the legal battle ended. Her voice came through tight and shaky, carrying something between anger and complete betrayal. "Dad, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the diner, like right now?" 20 minutes later, I slid into the booth across from her. My daughter looked absolutely exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept. Coffee cup gripped so tight her knuckles were white. "Mom's been lying," Rachel said without any preamble or small talk. "About everything. About all of it." I waited, letting her find the words she needed to say. Didn't push or prompt, just gave her space to get it out. "I was going through some old files at the firm. Estate documents, probate records, routine stuff. Dad, I found correspondence between Uncle Leonard's attorney and someone in our office. It's dated 2 years ago, 2 full years before the divorce even happened." My stomach tightened. "What kind of correspondence?" "Questions about inheritance law," Rachel explained, pulling out her phone with trembling hands, "specifically about protecting assets from marital claims, about timing transfers to avoid community property laws. Uncle Leonard was planning this long before Mom filed for divorce. He knew what she was doing, Dad. He knew what she was planning." "What do you mean, what she was doing?" I asked carefully, even though my gut was already telling me the answer. Rachel scrolled through photos on her phone, then turned the screen toward me. Bank statements, credit card receipts, all in Camila's name, all showing charges I'd never seen before. "Charges at expensive restaurants you guys never went to together," Rachel said, her voice getting harder. "Hotel rooms in the city, receipts from a jewelry store for men's items you never received. Dad, she was having an affair for at least 2 years, maybe longer." The words hit me, but didn't shock me. Part of me had known, deep down. The late nights at the salon, the conferences that never seemed to have any follow-up, the way she'd started dressing differently, wearing perfume she'd never worn before. "With who?" I managed to ask. Rachel's eyes met mine, and I saw real pain there. "Greg Thornton, your old business partner from the supply company, the guy you helped get his contractor's license 15 years ago." Greg Thornton, the man whose truck I'd lent when his broke down, the guy who'd been to our house for countless barbecues and birthday parties, who'd sat at my table and eaten my food and smiled to my face while stabbing me in the back. "How long?" My voice came out flat. "At least 2 years that I can document, maybe longer. I found text messages between them going back to before she even filed for divorce. She was planning to leave you for him, Dad. The whole drifting apart story, complete fiction. She was upgrading, or at least she thought she was." I sat back in the booth, processing everything. Those late nights, those conferences, the way she'd changed. None of it had been about personal growth or finding herself. It had all been about auditioning for a different life with a different man. "Does Dane know?" I asked quietly. Rachel shook her head. "Not yet. He's still defending her, still thinks you gave up without trying."
"Maybe it's time he knew the truth," I said quietly, looking at my daughter across the table.
Maybe it's time he stopped defending someone who doesn't deserve it. There's more, Dad, Rachel added, her voice dropping even lower. Mom's been losing money fast, like hemorrhaging it. The salon's drowning in debt. She took out massive loans against her share of the house to invest in some business venture with Greg, some scheme that was supposed to make them both rich. Let me guess, I said. It failed. Completely crashed and burned, Rachel confirmed. She's drowning financially, Dad. That's the real reason she came after your inheritance so hard. It wasn't about fairness or what she deserved. She's desperate, absolutely desperate. I looked at my daughter and saw the pain written across her face, the realization that her mother wasn't who she'd thought she was, that the narrative Camilla had been selling for months was nothing but carefully constructed fiction. I'm sorry you had to find all this out, I said gently, reaching across to squeeze her hand. I'm not, Rachel replied firmly, her voice getting stronger. I needed to know the truth, and so does Dane. He deserves to know who he's been defending all this time. That evening, Rachel called her brother. I wasn't on the call, but she told me later that Dane had gone completely silent when she laid out all the evidence. The affair with Greg, the financial lies, the calculated timing of the divorce, the 2-year deception. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, harder, colder. 2 days later, Dane showed up at my apartment completely unannounced, just appeared in my doorway late afternoon, hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 48 hours. I'm sorry, Dad, Dane said, his voice rough and raw. I believed her. I bought every word of her story. I thought you just gave up on the marriage without even trying. Come in, son, I said, stepping aside to let him pass. We sat in my small living room, the silence heavy and thick between us. Finally, Dane spoke again, staring at his hands. She played all of us, bitterly said. Made herself the victim in every version of the story. Made you look like the quitter, the guy who walked away. And I bought it. I actually believed you were weak. You believed your mother. That's not a crime, Dane. She's your mom. Of course you took her side initially. It is a crime when you're completely wrong, Dane said, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. When you accuse your father of being weak when he was actually just being decent. When he was taking the high road while she was burning everything down behind his back. I reached over and gripped his shoulder firmly. We're good, son. You and me, we're solid. We're good. Dane nodded, but I could see the anger simmering just beneath his surface composure. Not anger at me, anger at Camilla, at the lies, at the years of manipulation he hadn't even realized were happening. I'm done with her, Dad. Completely done. She doesn't get to call me anymore, doesn't get to show up at my place. I'm cutting her off entirely. The family was fracturing along completely new lines now, and this time, the truth was doing the splitting, not lies.
Camilla's carefully constructed world began collapsing faster than she could possibly rebuild it. Within a week of Rachel and Dane learning the full truth, her social media went completely dark. No more champagne photos, no more empowerment captions, no more curated living my best life posts. The whole performance just stopped dead. I heard through Rachel that Greg Thornton had bailed, just picked up and moved to Arizona without any warning, leaving Camilla holding the bag on their failed business venture. Left her with all the debt and absolutely no explanation. The man she'd traded 22 years of marriage for had disappeared the exact second things got difficult. The high-end salon she'd managed for years got sold to some regional chain. Corporate takeover, restructuring, all that business nonsense. Camilla wasn't offered a management position in the transition. They let her go with 2 weeks severance and a polite letter thanking her for her service. Just like that, her career was gone. Her apartment, that fancy high-rise with the views she'd posted so proudly about, went up for lease within a month. She'd fallen way behind on rent, couldn't keep up with the lifestyle she'd been advertising to the world. The image didn't match the reality anymore, and reality always wins eventually. I didn't take any pleasure in watching her life implode, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. Rachel kept me updated, not out of gossip, but because she thought I should know what was happening.
Mom moved in with Aunt Patricia, Rachel told me over coffee one afternoon. She's asking everyone for money, telling people she's just going through a rough patch. Is she? I asked. She's going through the consequences of her choices, Rachel corrected. That's different from a rough patch. A rough patch is bad luck. This is just karma doing its job. Dane had stopped taking Camilla's calls entirely. The betrayal had cut too deep, gone straight to the bone. He'd built his entire relationship with his mother on trust, and she'd obliterated it with lies stacked on top of more lies. When she tried reaching out through social media, he blocked her on every platform. When she showed up at his office unannounced, building security escorted her out. He wasn't playing games or being dramatic. He was just done. I'm done being her safety net, Dane told me when we met for lunch one day. She made her bed with expensive sheets she couldn't afford. Now she can lie in it alone. I understood his anger completely, but part of me worried about the bitterness taking root in him, growing into something that would poison him from the inside. Don't let her mistakes turn you into someone you're not, I advised carefully. You can cut her off without carrying hate around like a weight. There's a difference between boundaries and bitterness. Dane considered that for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're a better man than me, Dad. I don't know how you stay so calm through all this, how you don't just explode. I wasn't calm, I admitted honestly. I was just patient. And there's a big difference between those two things. The real turning point came when Derek Hopkins withdrew from Camilla's case entirely. Rachel found the official filing at work, a simple motion citing irreconcilable differences with the client. Translation, Camilla couldn't pay him anymore, and her case had zero merit anyway. Without legal representation, without money, without Greg, and without her children's support, Camilla was completely alone with the reality she'd created for herself. The consequences she'd been running from had finally caught up. Then the letter arrived. Handwritten on expensive stationery, delivered to my apartment in a plain white envelope. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. That distinctive loop on the capital letters, the way she pressed too hard with the pen. I opened it standing in my small kitchen, coffee getting cold on the counter. Francis, I know I have absolutely no right to ask anything of you. I know what I did. I know what I destroyed. But I'm asking anyway. Not for money, not for reconciliation, just for a chance to explain, to apologize, to acknowledge that I was wrong about everything. Wrong about you, wrong about us, wrong about what actually mattered in life. I threw away something real for something that looked shinier from a distance, and now I have nothing. The shiny thing turned out to be cheap plastic that broke the second I actually grabbed it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve that, and I know it. I just want you to know that I see it now. I see what I lost. I see what I threw away. I see the man you are, and the fool I was for not appreciating it. Camilla. I read the letter 3 times, standing there in my kitchen as my coffee went from cold to room temperature. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer with all the other legal documents from the divorce, and closed it. Some apologies come too late, not because they're insincere or fake, but because the person receiving them has already moved forward. The past is only valuable if you're still living in it, still letting it control your present. I wasn't living there anymore. I'd moved on completely. That evening, Vincent called with news. The probate on Leonard's estate is completely finalized, he said. All assets are officially transferred. The trust is active and locked down tight. Everything's protected. Good, I said simply. There's one more thing you should know, Vincent added. Leonard's video deposition has been submitted to the county records as part of the official estate documentation. It's public record now. Anyone can access it if they want to look. Which meant anyone curious enough could hear Leonard's words about Camilla, about her contempt for him, about her dismissal of family, about why he'd chosen me over her. It wasn't revenge. I hadn't leaked it or publicized it. It was just truth, preserved in an old man's voice, available for anyone who cared to look. I thanked Vincent and hung up. stood by my apartment window watching traffic move below in the growing darkness. My life was smaller now in terms of square footage and possessions, but it was larger in every way that actually mattered. I had my kids back, their trust, their respect, their genuine love instead of obligatory relationship. I had my integrity intact, my self-respect, my peace of mind. I had $8 million I never expected and never asked for. And most importantly, I had the deep, bone-level peace that comes from knowing I'd done nothing wrong, that I'd been the good guy in a story where the villain wore a navy blazer and smiled while filing divorce papers.
8 months after Leonard's death, I stood in front of the Leonard Ashford Memorial Community Center, watching the construction crews put the finishing touches on the building. The place looked absolutely beautiful, modern but warm, functional but welcoming, exactly what Leonard would have wanted. The brass plaque near the entrance read, "Leonard Ashford Memorial Center, dedicated to teaching trades and building futures." I'd used $2 million of the inheritance to establish this place, a full training facility for young people interested in learning real skills: plumbing, electrical work, carpentry, HVAC, everything you needed to build a solid career with your hands. Scholarships for kids who couldn't afford tuition, job placement programs connecting graduates with local contractors who actually needed skilled workers. Rachel stood beside me, her arm linked through mine. "He would have absolutely loved this, Dad," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I hope so," I replied, meaning it with everything I had. "I really hope so." My business had expanded significantly over the past year. 3 additional plumbers on the payroll now, 2 brand new trucks with the company logo painted on the sides, commercial contracts with property management companies and apartment complexes. Not because I desperately needed more money, the inheritance had taken care of that, but because I genuinely enjoyed the work, building things, fixing things, making things right. Dane had joined the business 6 months ago. After years grinding away in sales management, pushing products he didn't care about, he'd decided he wanted something more tangible, something real. We worked together 3 days a week now, and I taught him everything Leonard had taught me decades ago. "I'm sorry I doubted you, Dad," Dane said one afternoon while we were replacing a corroded water main in an old building downtown. "Sorry I believed her story instead of trusting you. Sorry I wasted time being angry at the wrong person." "Water into the bridge, son," I told him, tightening a connection with my pipe wrench, literally and figuratively. "You're here now. That's what matters. That's all that matters." Camila had completely disappeared from our lives. Last I had heard, through distant mutual acquaintances, she was living in Florida somewhere, working retail, trying to rebuild from absolutely nothing, starting over at 50-something, with no savings, no career, no support system. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, but I felt no sympathy either. She'd made her choices, played her games, and lost everything that mattered. That was on her, not on me. The house we'd shared for over 20 years sold at auction eventually. I drove past it once out of curiosity, just to see. A young family had bought it, swing set installed in the backyard, toys scattered across the lawn, kids' bikes on the porch. Life continuing, the world moving forward like our drama had never happened. I never remarried, dated occasionally when someone interesting crossed my path. Nothing serious, nothing heavy. At 60 years old, I'd learned something valuable. Solitude isn't the same thing as loneliness, not even close. I had my work. I had my kids and their genuine love and respect. I had my community center helping young people build real futures. I had Tuesday morning coffee with my contractor friends where we'd solve the world's problems over burnt diner coffee and mediocre eggs. Rachel got married in the spring. Beautiful ceremony, small and intimate, exactly what she wanted. When she hugged me afterward in her wedding dress, she whispered in my ear, "Thank you for showing me what real integrity looks like, Dad. What a good man actually is." That meant more than any inheritance ever could. One Sunday morning, I was sitting in my apartment reading the newspaper, actual paper, not a screen, when I noticed a small article buried in the business section.
Local salon chain files for bankruptcy. The company that had bought out Camila's salon had completely collapsed under debt and mismanagement. I thought about calling Rachel to mention it, then decided against it. Some people's failures aren't worth tracking or discussing. They're just noise in the background while you're living your own life. Instead, I drove to the community center, walked through the workshops where students were learning to thread pipes and install fixtures and wire electrical panels, watched them struggle with connections, succeed after multiple attempts, learn the same hard lessons Leonard had taught me 40 years ago when I was their age. One kid, maybe 19, skinny, all nervous energy, was fighting with a particularly stubborn pipe connection. I walked over, picked up a wrench, and showed him the exact technique Leonard had shown me decades ago. The same angle, the same pressure, the same patience. "There," I said when it finally clicked into place. "Feel that? That's what you're looking for." "Yeah," the kid grinned wide, proud of himself. "I got it. I actually got it." "Good," I said. "Now do it again and again, and keep doing it until you don't have to think about it anymore, until your hands know what to do before your brain does." I left him practicing and walked outside into the afternoon sunshine. My truck was parked nearby, dented, reliable, exactly like me. My phone buzzed with a text from Dane about supply orders for a big commercial job we'd landed. This was my life now. Smaller than Camila had wanted it to be, simpler than she'd dreamed, but bigger than I'd ever expected in the ways that actually counted. Built on foundations that couldn't be shaken because they were made of real things: skill, honesty, relationships that mattered, work that meant something. Leonard had given me $8 million. That was the number everyone focused on, the thing that made the story interesting to outsiders. But the real inheritance was the lesson buried underneath all those zeros: that wealth without character is just numbers on paper, empty digits at a bank account that don't actually mean anything when you're alone at night. That sometimes the people who walk away from you do you the biggest favor of your entire life. That integrity and patience and showing up every single day are worth more than any mansion or fancy car or social media performance. I climbed into my truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. Drove toward whatever came next in this life I'd rebuilt from scratch. And I drove with my head held high, my conscience clear, and my heart at peace. Because at the end of the day, when you strip away all the noise and drama and lies, what matters isn't what you have, it's who you are when nobody's watching. It's whether you can look at yourself in the mirror and respect the man looking back. And I could. Finally, after everything, I absolutely could.